Hey, this is misleading title Michele, and this is episode number 9, my why for a plant-based diet. Welcome to the I Cut the Mustard show, where a plant-based diet and small, simple moves make healthy change happen. And where we believe that you already have what it takes to slice through any barrier that stands in your way. Shing! You're sharp enough. You cut the mustard. Hey! Welcome to the podcast today. I am so excited to talk to you about my big why. And the reason that this title is misleading is because I actually have 4 big whys for choosing to eat a plant-based diet, and I want to share those with you today. Number 1 is, I've talked about this a little bit in my other podcast, but for health reasons. My first big why is for health reasons, and I came across this plant-based diet about 6 years ago at the time of the recording of this podcast, and I was experiencing lots of digestive issues and other things that I've explained to you in previous episodes, but a friend introduced me to Dr. Fuhrman's book, Eat to Live, and it totally changed my life. And the reason that I even read it was because, number 1, I already love vegetables, and I wasn't really loving that much meat. I lived in Japan for a few years, and I realized at that time that Americans eat a lot of meat, way more than the Japanese people, and I didn't really miss it at all whenever I was there. So whenever I read Dr. Fuhrman's book, then I was all good on meat. I didn't really need it anymore. I didn't really want it. I was only eating it because I felt like I had to get all of my nutrients. So whenever I read the book, it resonated with me. It totally made sense, and I just saw amazing results from it with my digestion and my skin and my energy. So that is my number 1 reason, is just for health. I just feel so much better whenever I eat a plant-based diet. And recently I started eating sugar again. Sometimes I go back and forth, and I kind of dip into it again sometimes. But so it was about a week where I had sugar almost every day, because whenever I eat sugar, I kind of fall off the bandwagon for a while. I read this amazing book. I finally feel like I've figured out this overeating thing for myself. The last little cog clicked into place, and I stopped eating sugar again. And I can't tell you how just one day of not eating sugar, I woke up and I was like, whoa, I can think clearly again, and I feel amazing and energized. Just one notch above what I was before. So this is an amazing diet for your health, and it totally makes sense. So that's my big why, is for health reasons, because I want to be free and happy and have all the energy to just experience the world and love my world that I have here. So number 2 is because the science is there. It just makes sense to me, and there's a lot of science to back it up. So this weekend, I went to a conference in Cleveland, the Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease and Cancer Conference, and they were sharing a lot of Dr. Esselson's research. He is one of the major thinkers in the plant-based world, and he did a groundbreaking research about heart disease at the exact same time that Dr. Dean Ornish was doing it out in California. So they were kind of doing parallel studies, and they were, so we learned a lot about heart disease and how the plant-based diet is really the best option for heart disease. So what happens in your body, I'm just going to go over it really quickly so you can get a little bit of a taste for why the plant-based diet makes sense as far as science goes. But they mentioned epithelial cells, which I'm going to throw out all the scientific words today. But epithelial cells are the cells that line your veins and your arteries. So they're these slippery little cells that line the inside of your veins and arteries. And the reason that they're important is because blood is a liquid, but if you go down to the microscopic level, it's got little chunkies in it, right? We've all seen microscopic views of blood before, and their, blood vessels are little round things, and, there's white blood cells that are kind of splotchy things. I don't know. So everything has a little shape, and it's like little teeny tiny balls or pieces that are inside our blood, right, on the microscopic level. So they could get stuck in your blood vessels if there's not this nice slippery lining to help them move through. So this slippery lining is super important. So blood needs to flow through. Otherwise, you start to get blood clots or starts to back up, right? And you can't get the energy and nutrients that you need to the different parts of your body. And that's why heart attacks happen, right? Whenever you eat foods that are high in fat, animal fats, dairy, and processed foods, which has the worst kind of fat, trans fats. Whenever you eat those kind of foods, and which also includes refined plant oils. So even though it comes from a plant, it doesn't mean it's always healthy. If you refine it down, that can still cause you some problems, right? So even those refined oils from plants make that lining sticky. It's not just that it's sticky so it gets blocked. That's not the only thing that's happening. It's sticky, so the cholesterol kind of hangs out there. It sticks to the edges. The other blood vessels and other things are sticking to the edges. The blood vessel gets irritated, like if you have a scratch on your arm or something. For example, if you just left a Band-Aid on your arm for days and days and days, and then you rip it off, it's very irritated, right? Because it's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to flow through, right? You're not supposed to leave it on there for very long. So that's kind of what's happening to the inside of your blood vessels. So they get sticky, stuff sticks to them, they get irritated, then it starts to form an infection after a while, which, pus comes with that and all the things. So it starts to get bulgy, which bulges out into the blood vessel, and the blood can't flow freely, right? So then after a while, if this bulge gets big enough, the blood circles, those little balls and things are hitting into the side of the lining. So eventually they can create a rupture. And that rupture is what causes a heart attack, because what happens if you get a cut on your skin and you get a rupture on your skin? It clogs, right? So you have a big bulge inside your blood vessel, which means there's not a lot of space for the blood to go by, for the blood to flow. And then in addition to that, you've just had a rupture. So now you've got a clot that forms there, which means now you have zero way for your blood to go through, right? And if this happens in a major blood vessel, then you can have a heart attack, or you can have, where you're having major pain in your arm or your leg or whatever. That's what we learned this weekend all about heart disease, that it all starts with these fatty oils that aren't really good for you, making your blood vessels sticky, and then they get stuck, pieces get stuck, and it gets all infected and bulgy and all that stuff. So this happens slowly over time because your body is amazing and healing, and it has so many repairing mechanisms inside it. So your body is so fabulous at taking care of yourself. And even though you're abusing it with these foods, if you're eating these foods, it can repair itself a lot and keep you from having that heart attack for a long, long time. These things worsen slowly over time. So if you're in your 60s and you're starting to experience heart attacks, or you're starting to have high blood pressure, this is the warning light that says, hey, you need to change what you're doing, or there's going to be some major consequences. So that's kind of the deep down level. One reason that the plant-based diet is amazing, because it takes out all of those oils and not all of the fat. You can't have a diet that has zero fat, but it takes out a lot of the bad fats that cause those problems. So at this conference, they were also sharing, they shared a lot of research, but one Dr. Brian, I don't have his name with me, I'll put it in the show notes, but Dr. Brian A. shared that one of his patients came in. This was before he became plant-based. He was a cardiologist, and he saw lots of different patients with heart disease and angina. And one of his patients came in after having 2 open heart surgeries. He came to this doctor for another opinion and said, "Can I really survive a 3rd one? And is that going to be worth it?" And this Dr. A says, he said, "Yes, I think you could, but I've recently gotten this book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. Since you're doing okay right now, why don't you try this book and see what happens and come back in 3 months?" So he gave him the book, and this patient was experiencing severe angina, which I talked about before, severe chest pain, so that he couldn't even do daily functions, and he was taking tons of nitrous oxide pills every day to relieve the pain. So when this patient came back in 3 months, he walked in. Doctor saw him from across the room and said, "Man, who is that guy? He looks good." So he came in and saw the patient, and he said, "Wow, this plant-based diet has changed my life. I just jumped in with both feet. I did it 100%. And after 1 week, my chest pain went away." And this is a guy who's been popping these nitrous oxide pills every single day just to make it through the day. But he said, in 1 week, I felt better. And they took his blood, and all of his levels were down. They were able to reduce his medication. And like many of the stories that we probably heard online or in these fabulous books, his heart disease reversed, and he was able to avoid that surgery. So super, super awesome stuff. So yeah, there's just one example of why the plant-based diet makes sense for science. And I could just talk at you all day, right, about the science behind the plant-based diet and how it makes sense. And it's been proven over and over and over again that it really is the best diet for our health. So like I said, number 1, my why is because I just have personal experience, and I know that I feel better whenever I eat whole foods and avoid processed foods. And next, because it makes sense with science. It's just logical. I can justify it with all the logic and the science behind it. My 3rd big why for choosing a plant-based diet is religious. Whenever I was having all of those health problems, I researched my religion as well. And what does it say? And I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we have a document. It's a revelation that was given to Joseph Smith, who restored and established this church back in the 1800s. And back in 1837, I believe, 38, he received this revelation about health. And we commonly call it the word of wisdom. So this revelation talks a lot about some addictive substances that we should avoid, like alcohol, tobacco, and some black tea and other teas. But it also includes a lot of advice about what we should eat. And I think in the church, in my church, a lot of people read this document and then we say, okay, we're doing great. We're avoiding alcohol and tobacco. We're so much healthier. This is fabulous. Check, pat on the back. But a lot of times we don't realize the treasure that we really have from the 1830s. And in the revelation, I'm not going to go into super detail here because I really want to do a different podcast to it because I'm very passionate about it and I think it's super cool. So whether you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or not, I think it's really just cool to dive into this document that was made so long ago and see how it outlines everything that the plant-based diet says. But I'm just going to give you the 4 major points that I find from the revelation. And number 1 would be to avoid addictive, harmful substances for your body, like the tobacco and the alcohol. And I personally include salt, sugar, and oil in that. It's just a generic principle that it's teaching us to avoid things that are addictive and harmful for our bodies. So I just wrap that all in there. And then the second thing that it says is that meat, the flesh of beasts, should be used sparingly. And it goes into defining that, which is, hey, not at all unless it's famine time, unless you're starving. So very, very sparingly. So then the next third principle that it teaches is to eat herbs and fruits in abundance and in their season. So plants, herb by herbs, back in the 1800s means plants. So plants and herbs, plants and fruits in abundance. So those are the best thing for you to eat. And then the fourth thing it says is grain is the staff of life. So grains, good carbs, eat good carbs. They're great for you, carbs are getting a really bad rap lately. Back in this Revelation, those are the four things that it says to do. So for me, as a religious person, it really confirms, I have personal experience. I can see the science makes sense. And then it's completely backed by this religious document that we have in my church. So for me, it's very compelling, and coming from lots of different areas of my life, I feel very strongly about living the plant-based diet. The other thing with religion, we are Christian as well, so there's plenty of examples in the Bible that suggest Daniel he refused the king's meat, and he felt much better, and he was able to do his job better. And there's a little citation in Genesis as well. So there's plenty of Christian examples that I can find to support the diet as well. So that's my third motivation. And then my number 4 is the planet, and very protective of it. And my dad just really instilled in me a love and respect for the earth, that we shouldn't litter. And he really loved the mountains and wanting to take care of them as well. So I've always really loved the planet, and it makes sense to me to do everything that I can to protect it, including reducing meat consumption, because it causes such again, this is like a whole nother podcast, but it corrodes the land, and cows and pigs and all the livestock really eat so much more grain, right? So not only are they stomping around, corroding the land, you could talk about cow burps and farts, right? But they are also just consuming a large amount of grains, and which uses a lot of our farmland and contributes to global poverty and global hunger. So those are the big ones for me, and I just think they really all make sense, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. Again, in future episodes, I want to go through them a little bit more in detail. But those are my big whys. And I guess my challenge for you today is to just find your big why. Maybe it's some of the things that I mentioned. Maybe it's some other things in addition to that, like not being a burden on your kids. Or I guess I could add a fifth why, that I really don't want to end up in the nursing home whenever I'm old. I don't like hospitals, and I don't like nursing homes, and I don't want to be in there whenever I'm old. I really want to avoid that and not be a burden to my kids. So things like that. Just go ahead and brainstorm your big why so that you can remember and stay motivated whenever you drive past Wendy's or Dairy Queen, or when you go to the maybe a gathering and someone made a special cake just for you, or they are trying to tempt you with various things. You can fall back on your why, and you can stay strong and make choices that you ultimately want in your life. Yoo-hoo! Thanks for jamming with me. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and click subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you next time for another great episode of the I Cut the Mustard Show.